We are reaching the final chapter of our live streaming festival, but as we know, every end is a new beginning. So we are now 1,101 people debating online. Our Telegram group is alive. And as somebody said within the chat, it has become a delocalized being, an entity of its own. And really, it is a privilege for us to be entangled with all of you. So keep sending us your questions. Our communications team up on the first floor is doing their best to answer them or to pass them on to Ike and me so that we can feed them into the live discussions to Peter, Bruno, and Donna. It's our pleasure to be joined by the curators of the exhibition, Peter Weibel and Bruno Latour. And Bruno, what Ika just asked you was whether the crickets are with us tonight or not, because if in the case we can't hear them, we have them in our hearts. They were so lovely on Friday evening.
I will not have cricket, but as a little welcome salute to Donna, I have a baboon skull, because Donna worked a lot on primates. She wrote this beautiful book, Primate Vision. And this is from my friend. So it's dead, but it's actually very alive because it's from my friend Shirley Strum.
Well, the baboon skull from Shirley Strum, held by Bruno, also brings Vincennes and her insistence on the importance of the practices of remembering the dead as they become alive among us. So that I think that baboon skull is an extremely powerful presence that I hope we all hold in mind. And I also have with me an icon, a kind of figure for the day, which is a Zapatista doll, who will tie us to Camille in ways that I hope will become clear in the discussion. But she was given to me by a friend who also links us to the struggle for land and water in Michoacan and Mexico by the Women United for the Struggle for Land and Water, who tie Camille into the compost of the terrestrial.
Right, so with this lovely round of introduction, together with the baboon skull and the Zapatista doll, we wanted also to introduce Annette, who is going to be our very dear colleague, who is going to navigate with us through this discussion. And, well, Bruno and Peter, we have already seen her, but please introduce this very special guest to our audience.
It is a great privilege and pleasure to welcome Donna Haraway and naturally also Bruno. Donna Haraway became world famous by her publication Cyborg Manifesto, 1985, as we all know. And since then, she has deepened our understanding of the human subject by making research into new relationships between human and machine, human and animals. And tonight, in this wonderful film, we learned already that you think you have brothers and sisters like Bruno Latour and Vicente Debré and Isabel Stengers, who together with you tell us a new story, a new narrative, which we need. And we need a new narrative about Earth. And this is precisely what is the subject of our three-day streaming festival. And I'm very happy that you are here with us, because you are one of the first pioneers to tell us a new story about Earthlings. And it was very wonderful to hear that you think that Bruno and Vivienne Debré and many others are your frère and sœur in this direction. So I think we should continue this direction. And I was very interested in your remark, Donna, when you said we have to learn thinking. This was a very important moment, because this is precisely what we have unlearned today. As you say correctly, we have all these kind of disciplines, but we have to learn thinking. I always say the last thing what we can defend is thinking. Bruno, what do you think about thinking?
I think the question was raised to Donna, no?
Yes, and of course it's brought, the we must think comes to me from Hannah Arendt and Isabel Latour, Isabel Stengers, Isabel Latour, right? There's a kind of a fusion of kinship there that is a little bit off the charts. but also Virginia Woolf, that we must think, and thinking is a materialist practice. It is not some kind of off into the skies to do theory from above, but that kind of rich materialist inquiring with each other who and where we are and so what. The old what is to be done, the question of the Russian Revolution that leads to the Russian Revolution. What is to be done in periods of profound historical earthly transformation that are extremely dangerous? So that I think thinking together, reading and writing and speaking and performing and dancing and growing and risking and working, thinking is a complex materialist practice for somehow coming together to be less stupid.
And it's a great pleasure to interview Donna. We have met 40 years ago. And it's probably 40 years that took me the time to understand, really, in this game of cat's cradle she mentioned, and the exhibition, which we actually call with Peter Weibel Gedanken Ausstellung, is a thinking machine. And Peter and the staff of ZKM, by this amazing virtual reality, made it even more mechanical, but also in many ways a very powerful way of thinking. So I have a few questions to ask you, Donna. The first, of course, more complicated in a way, was raised, I think, yesterday in the discussion we had with Coxia and with Vinciane Després, whom you know very well, which is trying to think what would you define the earthlings, to use Peter's expression, of the earthbound, in their subjective, mental, affective equipment? Because one of the arguments of a show is that we need to equip ourselves to land on Earth. We were equipped to get out of it, but we are not that much equipped to be on it. And as Peter said, you have been a pioneer in this multiplicity of connections we have to learn in order to settle on Earth. So after all these years, since the Primate Vision book, and today in the situation of this exhibition, what would be a sort of good definition in a few minutes of the terrestrial? I have to mention before you answer the question that not only is it fabulous to end the exhibition with you and with Lynn Margulis, but you also end the catalog, which is a fabulous book. And you end in the last chapter teaching your old friend Bruno a lesson on what it is to learn from science fiction. So I wanted to underline that twice you are at the pinnacle, so to speak, of this exhibition. So what is the terrestrial?
Well, you and I have learned from each other since I was handed laboratory life by my boss at Johns Hopkins University and told to review it for ISIS, for the History of Science journal. And from that time on, I think you and I have been engaged in a kind of collaboration and conflict, a kind of full of friction and joy, learning from and with each other and tugging each other into places we didn't want to go originally, both of us. And I think that's partly what being terrestrial is about, that living in the terrestrial is being at risk to each other in the course of living and dying with all of those who make the Earth, so that the Earth, as Lynn Margulis teaches us, as Lovelock also in his own way, but I think Margulis is my teacher more than Lovelock, precisely because she works from, as you called it yesterday, below, precisely because she works with the extremely acute consciousness of the entangled living beings who together constitute the movement of time and body, evolution, and that being terrestrial is not so much landing from above, except for those people who shot off into parabolic, tragic, phallic space and are coming down in the grand detumescence at last, and they'll land whether they want to or not, and I hope they crash. Though in some non-optional sense, we were all really on an earth-wide basis forced to take off in the great modernizing projects of colonial capitalism, which truly did transform the earth. And whether no one was unaffected by that. That said, very many peoples of the earth, human and non-human, never took off, and are in and of the earth and teaching each other and teaching us now. And this includes, on the human level, many of the indigenous peoples of the earth and working peoples of the earth who never fully took off, even as they were subject to genocide, subject to all kinds of consolidations in national states. Indigenous peoples are not just elsewhere in the so-called non-West. It isn't just the Sami of Europe. The complex relations of local and indigenous, both for the human and the non-human, have never left the earth and have much to teach us. Have never stopped living in a terrestrial way, which is not the same thing as living innocently. It is not to live in some kind of blissed out techno-earthliness or a non-techno. It's not about, forget the word techno, it's neither for or against techno. It's that this is not about innocence, but it is about living and dying and not setting off into some kind of escape velocity, either in theory or in techno-fixing or anything else. That living as a terrestrial being is, in some sense, coming to consciousness of what we always have been. In Scott Gilbert's sense, we've never been modern. In your sense, we've never been individuals. We are all lichens now. Coming to an intense realization of mortality, really, which is about living well with each other as terrestrial beings. And that means profoundly, just the last thing, taking a kind of care and justice, a kind of living with the lust for caring and justice, which brings me to Depeche's insistence yesterday about the realities of the acute realities of mass immiseration, of mass poverty, the mass extinctions of the non-human and the mass genocides of the human and the non-human, the wiping out of the mud huts, the deportations from the United States, the forced labor in the animal industrial processing plants so that he who must not be named, aka Trump, can have his hamburgers. The ongoing immiseration is the understanding our connectedness to that, not in some kind of, oh my, how terrible, but oh my, we are in this together, and no matter where we are positioned, we are responsible to and for each other. I think that's about being terrestrial.
This is another way of asking the same question. So the fact that yesterday Emanuele Koksha was talking about care space, and among the care space, and it was very clear in the film, you spend actually with Terra Nova quite a long time about this key question of kin, which, as you know, is a large part of the anxiety of what we call populist, but which is also about population, which is also about what sort of kids, not only how many kids, but what sort of kid we should have. And not only kids, but all of the other critters, as you say, that we need to learn to live with. It's a very touchy question, but the film spent a lot of time about it. And I'd like to hear this argument, make kin, not baby. I know the book, because it's such interesting ways of being terrestrial, simultaneously relearning the skill of reproduction or re-engendering, but with a little twist, which is getting out of a patriarchal family, so to speak. How would you now handle this question, especially with the immense importance of a populist movement and the danger of associating this question with demography?
Touchy is an understatement. This topic is controversial for excellent reasons. Just last week, he who must not be named was at an automobile plant in Michigan talking about Henry Ford's good bloodlines, a straight up fascist eugenics identification at a moment where, as you spoke 2 days ago, the conservative revolution is gripping the earth in Brazil, in India, in the United States, in Hungary, and many, many, many other places globally. The conservative revolution and catastrophe capitalism, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars are accruing to the most wealthy. Depeche also pointed out that it was the flood of fossil fuels that propelled what I call the born ones, the numbering of the earth in ways that produce intense suffering for the born ones. I include in the born ones the animals of the animal industrial complex, the 11 billions of the humans of the earth, if we're incredibly lucky. By the end of this century, it may well be more than that. Propelled by the same apparatus of destruction and radical simplification of complex biosocial worlds, the propelling of endless growth simultaneously with a kind of necrophiliac disregard for those whose lives have no value. So as a feminist, my politics around kin have certain there's a little bit of a catechism. No coercive population control programs, thank you. In the last instance, these questions belong in the responsibility of those who would bring a new person into the world, especially the pregnant woman. There is no substitute for the woman's autonomy and self-determination in the last instance, and so forth. The fact of eugenicist and racist population control programs that are not finished, but are going on right now as we speak at 11:20 California time. This is not something of the past. All of that and the producing of the earth where people have been rooted out of land, rooted out of their own ways of controlling their own communities and numbers, where critters, not just animals, but animals and plants and microbes have been radically renumbered so that certain kinds of entities like the COVID-19 virus are running amok all over the earth, in no small part because of the radical simplification of entire worlds, entire biospheres, okay? Such that the radical bad numbering, shall we call it, has to be addressed. And one of the aspects of that is the forming of non-biogenetic, non-reproductive modes of making kin with each other as human beings, especially the rich, whose children take an especial toll on the planet, but not only the rich. Being in alliance with those who are caring for the earth. We also know that all over the earth, human beings have reduced their birth rates, except perhaps in the most immiserated and exploited areas of the earth, where the birth rates remain high by demographers' ways of measuring high and low. That kind of remaining in alliance with those peoples all over the earth who are living with way smaller rates of birthing than have ever been practiced by human beings on this planet. So that one of the obligations for thinking is to come to understand and to form flourishing communities where the numbers of babies will be way fewer than has ever been true for our species. And it will be true all over the earth, like it or not. It's happening. So what constitutes flourishing kin making? How do we not fall into right-wing eugenicist, pronatalist, cut off abortion funding, cut off reproductive funding for lesbians in Taiwan, for example, or how do we not fall into birth rates are too low, therefore we must now promote them. How do we instead learn to build flourishing worlds such that over a period of a couple of hundred years, it took us a few hundred years to get here, the numbers of human beings and other critters on the earth will be in patternings that are less destructive. How to do that is an urgent question of being a political subject in the terrestrial. So as you can see, I avoided the word overpopulation. I won't use it. It is hopelessly enmeshed in eugenics and coercive population control programs, but being accountable for the numbering in a multi-species way attuned to justice and care as the means and not just the end. So it's not just a goal, it's got to be the means. How's that for a
Yeah, it's a marvelous summary of a beautiful, very interesting Kind Not Baby book, which I'm sure it's translated in German as well. And the multi-species lead me to my third question, if I'm allowed by the studio, which is that we have been building this exhibition, try to learn from you how to stay in the trouble, basically. I mean, this is not an escapist exhibition. And one of the characters which we try to bring to the masses, so to speak, is this character that I'm not sure we love it, but we are impressed by it, which is Gaia. And with his two founders, so to speak, mothers and fathers in some sort of strange way, Lovelock and Margulis. And we'll finish the day with Margulis. And there is this very famous quote by Margulis: Gaia is a tough bitch. So I'd like to know now, how would you, after the COVID sort of pandemic and the mass of reaction that people had around it, what would be now the best way to get at the strange, puzzling, bitchy character of Gaia, according to you?
Well, that's a huge, the need to not know, is really important. That sense of, with others, I am struggling. We are struggling together to know this, to know something. That said, I think that to take Gaia seriously is to take seriously many layers of time and space, many kinds of history, many kinds of connectivities that are still emergent. It is to take seriously catastrophe. For example, there is the slow catastrophe of climate destruction. Not just climate change, but climate destruction, which is a slow catastrophe and very hard for those within it quite to know how to notice, so that the instrumentations required to notice a slow catastrophe, some of the critical zone instrumentation, I think, is very much about how to notice things that are outside of the normal sense of time within our situatedness in Gaia. The pandemic is a fast catastrophe. The rate of viral reproduction and viral spread forces a mode of attention that is actually, in this case, not slower than that which human beings normally know how to attend to, but faster. So that we are forced into a kind of temporality of the virus, which is very fast indeed. Also a Gaian, that is also a Gaian temporality. And at the same time, I want to go back to another kind of temporality, which ties me back to Camille, who is a critter of Gaia. Camille is a child of Gaia, belongs to the communities of compost, which are the communities of Gaia. And that Camille, especially Camille too, spends a lot of time in Mexico and spends a lot of time in Michoacan and Mexico, and educated by the Zapatista women in Michoacan for the defense of land and water. And that simultaneously Camille, who comes from West Virginia, a community destroyed by coal, is also in alliance with the Navajo Nation, where coal and uranium continue to wreak havoc in the Navajo Nation in such a way that in the United States, the most extreme scene of COVID destruction is among the Navajo. New York was terrible, but New York, of course, has many tens of millions of people, so you can't not see it. The actual rate of devastation is more intense in Diné-Bekeya, in Dineta, in Navajo land, in no small part as a consequence of the stealing of the water to build the cities of the Southwest, the stealing of the water to process the coal from the coal mines in the Navajo Nation, then exported with the water of the Navajo aquifer, and burned to produce extraordinary air pollution, which itself also produces greater susceptibility to the damage of the COVID virus. That's living in Gaia too. So my sense of needing always multiple consciousness, but it's not just a kind of pointillist, let's now enjoy multiple consciousness, but the connectedness, which is the connectedness of our responsibility to and for each other. So that the Camille stories, they're full of joy and experimentation and play, and are also, I hope, science fiction, speculative fantasy that tries to imagine a terrestrial revolutionary subject.
Okay, I would have two questions to Donna. First of all, your remark that you feel closer to Lynn Margulis was precisely the idea of our programming. Yesterday, we devoted the program to two outstanding men, James Lovelock and Bruno Latour. Today, we devote the program to two outstanding women, Donna Haraway and Lynn Margulis. This was our idea. But I have two questions for you. I assume that our viewers are not as familiar with your writings and ideas as Bruno and me. Therefore, I have again this question. Why did you feel it was necessary to extend the humanist conception of personhood and subjectivity into machine-human relations and machine-animal relations? Was it in a paradoxical dialectic to save the human surviving on this planet? Because it was, why do you start to say it is a too narrow humanist conception that we define humanity as a closed operation? You started to say we have to extend it into machine-human and animal-human relationship. Was it because you realized we need this new story, this new narrative to survive, that human species can survive on this planet? It was necessary to extend the concept of human. This is my first question.
Yes, I think that the concept of human was radically narrowed in it first, and the notions of human exceptionalism and the human is a radically narrowed conception of what it is to be humus, what it is to be human as a terrestrial, and that in some sense, I didn't expand the conception of the human into all that is Gaia, so much as come to some kind of larger consciousness that this has always and still is, and that it does not exclude what we will call machines. And I draw in a way from Mel Chen's notion of animacy. The machine is not inanimate. Marx even understood that as he talked about dead labor, the kind of building of labor into the machines to further extract value without the need to have, pesky actual workers in the factory. The drive toward roboticization to extract value from dead labor. There are other ways of living with machines, and the machines as part of living and dying well with each other are not our enemies. So that in no sense am I an anti-humanist in the sense of, any more than I'm anti-babies in my make kin not babies thing. Rather, it is about really coming to some kind of materialist thinking about the entanglement that is the earth, and being responsible, cultivating the capacity of response, being response able, that cultivating of the capacity of response. So it's not that I extended the human, as I finally got completely furious with the way the human had been narrowed.
Okay, Bruno?
No, because I think it's a marvelous, before we let the public ask question, and I'm sure there are many to Donna, this word responsibility is, I think, the drive for what we try to do in the show, especially with all the workshops and all of the amazing numbers of things that Barbara is trying to prepare for us in the next month. To become responsible. Responsibility is one of the best pun, and that Donna taught us, and she made lots of them. But this one is probably for an exhibition the best one.
I have another delicate question to Donna. Maybe you have read the last book by James Lovelock about Nova Scene.
I have.
No? In this book, Nova Scene, he writes that the rise of artificial intelligence is the next step in evolution. As far as I understand, Bruno is not so much in favor of the idea. I'm more in favor of this idea, and I think you are also in favor of this idea, that we need artificial intelligence, a next step of evolution. So I ask you and then ask Bruno. First, I want to hear your opinion, please.
Well,
please, Donna, please.
Insofar as the next step in evolution is, first of all, an orthogenetic view of evolution. So we've moved from the primal soup, and now finally we're going to bliss off Earth into total artificial intelligence. That's truly silly. On the other hand, artificial intelligence is an actual materialist practice that does really interesting things. That can be possibly that integrated into art practices or labor practices or maybe kinds of agricultural practices of different. I'm not against the materialist practices and skills of artificial intelligence. I am totally beyond against the stupid notion of orthogenetic evolution toward blissing off Earth, finally in artificial intelligence or total roboticization. It's a white male phallic masturbation.
Now you made Bruno happy. Yeah?
Yeah, Bruno and I make each other happy quite a lot.
Then I have another question. When I remember correctly, you once criticized the Western idea of origin and end of history. Yeah? Why are you against this bracket?
Well, same reason I can't stand what I think to be the Novacene. I haven't read that book for a reason, because I read little blurbs about it and I thought my life is too short. I'd much rather read Atterrir or something. End of history. What arrogance! What arrogance! That somehow, first of all, that history is Western, just nuts. That somehow the profound ways of living and narrating and performing and closing in as well as spreading ways of living, the notion that history is Western is the same arrogance that produces man. And the end of history is a fantasy. Well, I go back to Ursula Le Guin and her carrier bag theory of fiction. We've heard the prick tale, the dick tale long enough. Thank you. It's way past time to make louder and to tell ourselves the stories of ongoing, the stories of the net bags, of the sharing, which of course include horrible things too. And as Ursula Le Guin says in the carrier bag theory of fiction, it's not that she's in a good mood. She's constantly, old lady is whacking people with her purse. You know, it's not. But the notion of the end of history is just arrogant.
Unfortunately, the public missed the applause coming from the Critical Zones studio when Donna talked.
So what?
We were applauding every single word you said, actually. Thank you so much. And it actually made me think of what happened in the chat yesterday, where at some point, obviously I don't remember what point it happened, but somebody said, tomorrow Donna is going to fix everything. So
yeah, right.
thank you so much. Dear moderators, may I jump in with a question from the audience? So there are obviously many, but actually if we are at this point, maybe the question from Karina could be quite interesting, because she asked, are techno-fixed solutions towards the problem of climate change just fictional expectations in the dynamic of capitalism? So is this techno-fixation just a fictional expectation? That's what she's asking. Do you want me to repeat the question? I maybe read it out too loud, too fast.
The question, I wish it were fictional in the sense of not real. I think capitalist apparatuses have the material and financial and narrative power to make real what they imagine. That realization of the world in that sense is a project. Do I think it'll fail? Yes. Do I think it will do immense damage in the process of crashing? Yes. So yes, it's fictional, but not in the sense of merely imaginary, because these stories have the power to realize themselves, not to realize themselves, but they, we are truly fighting the conservative revolution, the right-wing turn, and a much larger apparatus of 500 years. It's not our imaginations.
This is a very good question. Ika, do you want to read out the one from Friends with the metaphors?
Yes. So yesterday we had a huge discussion in the Telegram group concerning metaphors, and there's a question by Friends, are metaphors telling new stories? If yes, how? Under which conditions? And also to Bruno, how do metaphors work in critical zones, in zones of contact between different spheres? So perhaps Donna first, if possible, right now.
Well, I was upset yesterday by I think it's partly I get to work in English and other folks aren't working in their own native language. The notion of resorting to metaphor bothered me, as if we were somehow outside of metaphor. It would be like being outside of Gaia. The metaphor is never merely metaphor. That figuration of the world in tropes is not just human either. So that and the being inventive about retroping, refiguring with each other worlds that are more lively. I'm extremely interested not in resorting to metaphor, but engaging in metaphorization, which is another way of engaging in mondialisation. Mondialisation.
Bruno?
I completely agree with what Donna, and for good reason, because we've been working on this idea that metaphor is a word that is used as if there was an opposite. The opposite would be probably literal, but the point that is not literal. So the notion of using metaphor as if it was a sort of lesser of two evil is, I think, mistaken. Metaphor means transportation, and we transport stuff. And there are people who are better at it, like Donna, and there are better people who are very bad at it, and that's what they call literal.
Well, and literal is itself a figure. It's not the absence of figure. I think of what Sharon Trawick taught us years ago when she studied the particle physicists at Stanford, and she talked about the culture of no culture, or the affect of no affect. The metaphor of no metaphor is itself a bad fantasy called literal.
Give a linguistic idea, introduction, what is a metaphor? Huh? Because linguistically speaking, you compare two fields of knowledge. For example, we know something about the mountains and something about our body. Yeah? And metaphor is only working when you have legitimate ground of comparing two fields. You can say it's the feet of the mountain. Yeah? Normally, in philosophy, you work in definitions. Yeah? Definition means from the word finis, end. Yeah? And the prefix "d" means it's even more than an end. It's a confirmation of how to end. Yeah? And the definition comes a strategy from the Pope and from religions. They said, we define what is really truth. Yeah? Now, when you use metaphors, you are working against definition. Yeah? You open again the possibility for new ideas. Yeah? Therefore, it's very legitimate to use metaphors. Yeah? Or to give a short course into linguistic theory. Yeah?
Which is not the setting.
What?
This is not the right setting for lectures on metaphors.
Okay.
Well, all of the figures.
What is
economy,
the next question?
Yeah. Okay.
From the audience?
I think Donna wanted to answer. So Donna, go ahead. Just you didn't want to.
Well, my linguistics is more Peircean than I think Peter's is. But I think all of the figures, the practices of figuring and languaging and doing semiotics or doing semiosis, so that metaphor is only a small piece of it. And in that sense, definition is also a figure. But enough of that.
Okay, so coming from the metaphors and storytelling, we have another question from the audience. It's concerning it's to Bruno and Donna. How to think political education terrestrial? How to think political education terrestrial?
Can I say something about that?
Please.
It is one of the funniest memory when I put the two great leaders of my thinking, which is Isabelle Stengers and Donna Haraway in Paris. You know, the French, I mean, they have a very strange idea about politics. It has to be about very strong action, and basically they try to take the Bastille constantly. And here was Donna Haraway, the famous Californian, very politically minded, etc. What did she talk about? Dog, a dog. And not only dogs in general, the French would have accepted dogs in general, but one dog with a name in addition, Cayenne, what we show in the film. And people were completely furious. They began to attack Donna and say, this is not politics, why do you call it? And then Isabelle Stengers took the floor, and in a very kind but vicious way of talking, she demonstrated to them that this was the great political change because of a multi-species argument that with an amazing book Donna was doing. Sorry for this little piece of history, but it's a great way to answer the question.
Donna, go ahead.
I gave a talk in Florence many years ago, and a group of feminists from Rome took the train up to hear me. And I talked about the Companion Species Manifesto, and I talked about Cayenne, and they were furious. You can't possibly be a feminist if you're now talking about dogs. Where are your politics? Well, many things to say about that. One is the turn to really taking being terrestrial seriously. The other is to understand that if you Cayenne and I look into each other's eyes, who are you, who am I, who are we together? And that brought me many places, including to the story of the Navajo rough sheep, the art market for the rugs, the importation of sheep into California after the gold rush, the history of the dogs of conquest, the history of the dogs of sport and of breeding, and of the research dogs in the behavioral ethology laboratories, the dogs of companionship, the dog pet industry and the profit margin of the now fully bourgeoisification, the dogs who now have really good health insurance, and you can't actually go online and get the profit margins of the pet toy industries because they're trade secrets. Dogs lead you everywhere. Anything you take seriously, any relationship that matters, lands you in the terrestrial, with all of its connectedness. And you can't follow every connection, of course, and no one person can or should imagine doing it all. But that taking the intimate seriously is not about leaving politics. It's about the ongoing education, that educator, the Greek figure of the educator who leads and teaches, and it's about traveling. So taking each other seriously is taking politics seriously.
I think taking relationships seriously leads us to the notion of care. And there was one question in the talk by Franziska, and I'm just going to read it out. She wrote, "I would be very interested to know how Donna would differentiate between human care and human control. To me, this oftentimes is such a thin line, but there is a difference which is important."
Linguistically, it's easy. In practice, it's hard. And furthermore, I don't think control is a bad word. And I don't think care is the only practice we need to be engaged in. And care itself involves both curare, care, both poison and remedy is embedded in the word curare, which is the root of care. So that caring practices are not some kind of sentimentalized, being nice. Care, truly to live in caring, to live and die in caring, involves being in the thick of contradiction. There is no way not to be engaged in the duality of care and poison, of cure and poison. So you don't need to go to control. That the inherent complexity and contradictoriness and non-innocence of being for each other, of being for some ways of life and not others, as I tried to say in the film. So that involves, among other things, practices of control. And as people know from the way I have talked about dog worlds, not to be engaged in educational practices of teaching good manners to the human being as well as to the dog, which is teaching practices of control. And it's partly mutual, but I'd be a fool not to say it is also hierarchical. Practices of control are also practices of keeping each other alive. For example, I want a serious public health system in the United States with serious practices of control which do not exist. And thousands of people are dying because of anemic and hollowed out practices of public health, which are, among other things, practices of control and care.
Right, and linking with that question, there is a slightly critical one where Jorge is uneasy about possible links between making kin, not population, and eco-fascist populism, as he writes. And he asks, who can make kin? Who can make babies? And I was wondering, maybe you could answer to his uneasiness there.
Well, I'm uneasy too, and Bruno raised that question. I tried to address it in the way I answered that question. Coercive population control programs must be opposed with all energy. In the last instances, people who make babies are in charge of that decision. Reproductive autonomy is extremely important and has to be defended because it's always under attack. And eugenics are real; they're not old-fashioned; they're up to the minute. And the engaging in politics, in writing and thinking, in performing, in art, in all sorts of things to make real, making odd kin, making non-biogenetic kin with each other. It's already going on everywhere. Let's just join in. As my friend Katie King always says, there's more going on than you thought and less than there should be. So I think that the opposing of the right-wing fascist relationship to population remains an obligation. We have to cultivate responsibility, and we really need to pay attention to the supernumerary, the out-of-balance numbering of this earth. It's not, and there's no innocent way to do it.
So, dear Donna, dear Bruno, as we have 2 minutes left, a short question and a short answer, please. So, the question is stopping climate change only possible if connected with the change of the economic system?
Bruno?
Donna, please.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. And that transformation is urgent and huge. And at the moment, we're not winning.
But we have to remember one of the things that Donna taught us, which is economy is actually not the way economy run. Economy, in the sense of the numbers of people selling and buying and producing things, has nothing to do with the way they actually achieved. I mean, we know that from Marx, but we learn quite a lot since then about the numbers of entities which have to be brought in for economy to exist. So it's not destroying the economy or transforming the economy and doing another system. It's actually embedding the economical practices into what they feed on from day one, which is slavery, coal, numbers of other species, etc. And that's what I call down to earth, and that the show is trying to make as well. So it's actually, the show is an answer to this beautiful question.
I knew a short yes was not going to be enough. So thank you very, very much. Thank you, Bruno and Donna. And Donna, as a last question after this wonderful, phenomenal discussion, we thought you could maybe ask a question yourself, because as we've seen, our Telegram chat has muted into a, I don't know, cyborg, holobiont entity, a tentacular being of its own. So we would like to keep it alive even beyond our live streaming festival. And we thought maybe you could give us a question back that we can feed into the Telegram chat and that people can discuss even after tonight.
Well, you alerted me beforehand that you were going to ask me to do this. And I think what I would like to do is ask the folks in Telegram to take a second, take a little time to find something that each person really cares about, something that matters. Some can be, I don't care if it's big or little, but something that matters. And how from that one proposes building a connection for a revolutionary terrestrial subject, how one proposes building the connectivity which can be part of transformation.
Can I just make a little advertisement about what Ika presented before, which is the questionnaire, which is exactly on that site?
Exactly right. Bruno asked that in this writing a couple months ago. That is very important.
Going to point out the questionnaire again, so in case you missed the tour yesterday with Martin where he presented it, and today we repeated it, you find the link to the questionnaire on the digital platform of the Critical Zones exhibition and also on the Media Lab homepage. And I don't know if our video studio is fast enough to embed the link again. Maybe they'll be angry at me for asking this, I don't know. Let's just see. Here we go. Wow, that was fast. And can we... Wonderful. I have to say, we've been getting more and more professional. Sorry. This is super proud of them. Nice. Okay. Maybe, Peter, you want to introduce us into the last, the ceremonious end? Maybe now is a good moment for you.
First of all, I would like to thank really for the pleasure and the privilege, Donna said, you have shared your expertise and your time with us. Thank you so much. And naturally, we have to thank Bruno. Said he has made available all his friends and colleagues and his network. Otherwise, we could not have such a wonderful discussion. The next program will be some films. And before I introduce the films, I would like to summarize my own private experience, my own private view of this 3-day festival. I would say during this 3-day streaming festival, all of us who have been involved as panelists, as speakers, as technicians, etc., as viewers, etc., we have experienced the rise of a new movement in science, what is called critical zones. This movement attracts thousands of researchers who, with high-tech tools in hundreds of observatories around the world, observe since many years the thin biofilm, the thin skin of the Earth, the land on which we live and from which we live. The last days, with this virtual opening and the following exhibition, thanks to Bruno Latour, this movement enters in the cultural spheres. It is important this movement exists in the scientific spheres, but now it enters the cultural sphere. By lectures, talks, films, discussions, we learned and will still learn enormously much. We have now a new view on planet Earth. We have now a new story, as Donna Haraway says, down to Earth, above from the sky. The climate crisis is since many decades a signal, an alarming signal that mankind has to change its attitude towards the Earth, because man's interventions in the environment, what we call the age of Anthropocene, destroy the self-regulatory cybernetic circles of sustaining life on the planet Earth, especially in the atmosphere, as just mentioned the famous ozone hole. The actual corona crisis is another signal, an alarming signal about the planet Earth as a patient. This lockdown, this shutdown of all human activities shows us the dark side of globalization. Mass transportation, mass travels, mass movements of people and commodities, mass consumption and mass destruction of natural resources helped and caused the coronavirus to spread globally with an exponential speed. Global mass mobility has ended in total individual immobility. Globalization promised us a world without borders, but now we just realize the opposite. The borders start in front of your house. The borders start even in front of your apartment, of our chambers, about our rooms. Now we are back to around 1800, because around 1800, the French writer Xavier de Maistre, he was locked in a prison in Turin because of a duel. And Xavier de Maistre wrote already a prophetic book, which is called Voyage autour de ma chambre, travel around my room. So what is now at the end of globalization after 200 years? We are back 200 years. We stay and we are locked in our apartments. We cannot travel. Naturally, I will explain later, we can travel, but only with signals. So it is strange. It was promised us a world without borders, and now we are locked in borders inside our apartment. So what we experience here, we are living in critical times caused by the coronavirus. Another signal that planet Earth is a crisis. Now my question is, do people hear the signal as asked by the famous anthem, the famous melody, so-called the Internationale? At the end of the 19th century, there was this famous song, "Wake up, people hear the signals, on to the last fight." And I would say a fight for survival. This is a final struggle for survival. Let us grow together. But now I change. The phrase is wrong, because in the Internationale it is said, the Earth belongs only to men. This is wrong. This is an anthropocenic point of view. No? We have to say, let us grow together, let us group together, stand up, all Earthlings. I would say we hear the signals, and that means we have now a new holobiontic view, which teaches us, let's group together living and non-living, biotic and unbiotic entities. The scientists of the critical zone teach us a new perspective, a new story, a new orientation, how to get out of this crisis. We can say all the people who participated in the streaming festival did hear the signals and experienced a paradigm shift, which can be summarized with the words of Bruno Latour, down to earth. What is important, we have learned we are now locked in, Bruno, but we are only our bodies are locked in. Because, as I said, since the invention of teletechnology, the messenger is separated from the message. So we can send our messages without the bodies. We can communicate, we can argue, we can make conversation. This is a new story. That everything is interlaced today. And therefore, what we realize too, I come to the end, in the streaming festival, museums have a new function. Normally, we have this mad art markets, mega billionaires, mega collectors, mega dealers. But this mad art market, in fact, is marginalizing and even destroying the most important art which is happening in contemporary art circles. So what we see now is not only a new beginning in life sciences, we also see a new beginning how art should operate. Museums should not be complicit with the art market. Museums should open the doors to new horizons of life sciences. And horizon means not only the horizon of the sea, horizon means also layers. And therefore, we are studying new layers, not only underneath the skin of the Earth, we are also studying new layers in the Earth world. And this was only possible, this new view on the function of museum, a new function of science, a new function of art, with the help of our co-curators, with the help of our technical team at ZKM. We did really grandiose work, and also with all of the participants and panels, etc. First, I only can say, Earthlings of the world, Earthlings of Earth, unite.
I will not believe if I've been asked that Peter Weibel would rewrite the International and would begin to take up the role of a new Lenin, so to speak, simultaneously talking about the artificial intelligence and going down to earth. I mean, as we have done 4 exhibitions together, we disagree on almost everything, but it's another cat's cradle like the one with Donna, and it's absolutely marvelous to confess tonight, that he was right. I was highly skeptical of the possibility of doing a virtual world. But again, after 4 exhibitions, I had underestimated what can be done by the ZKM staff. And this is why it was so amazing. Of course, during the day, we certainly offer many careers to Barbara, because I'm sure that many televisions are now wanting to get her as an anchor woman. And Ika and Annette, certainly as amazing organizer. This thing, when Annette first sent me the list, I thought this was impossible. It will never work. There will be too many glitches, and especially we would miss the whole interaction. Well, we do miss. I'd love to have a beer or a glass of wine now with Donna and with the people before. But I must confess that Peter was right. But of course, this thing would not have been possible without Daria, Bettina, and Martin, and I will let them speak. But before they speak, I send you, Peter, and the amazing ZKM staff, my great thanks. I'm very moved by the quality of the work. The nice thing now is that we will have a second opening, this time physical, and then many other openings as we go on all the way to February. And at the time, everyone will have read the book, the amazing catalog, which is produced by Jens and by and staged and laid out by Donato. So we'll have a great pleasure of having a second opening and then a closure and many other occasions to meet. And this time we will have a champagne, which I miss dearly, I have to say. Thank you all.
Please, Martin, summarize your own point of view.
No, but I will not add too much because there was already so many stories about so many amazing ideas during these 3 days, and it was so rich. But I just want to add a quick thing. You talked about the new functions of the museum, and we need to talk about one very specific aspect, which is the function the museum had in the collaboration with the study group at IFG. They were mentioned today, but again, it's been really a marvelous experience to be able to set up for 2 years these seminars on a regular basis. And really, like, they brought in so many ideas. They were so generous. And so specifically, we need to thank Daniel Irgang, who made all of that completely possible, who managed to bridge everybody together. Huge thanks to you, Daniel. You were always there when we needed to bridge people from those different disciplines, the different institutions. And we need to thank all of the students for what they did, noting that students is not necessarily the right word when you see how professional they were. Like, if you take the design of the website by Robert Prost and Stephanie Rowe, the website is splendid, and really your graphic qualities were really key for it. Or all the workshops that we're going to be able to do. Again, I know that today, yesterday, and in the following week, Mira Hirtz, Mikhail Rybakov are going to be all doing all of this. And really, we have to keep this community alive. Like, having the possibility of a museum which collaborates, which brings a thinker into an art school to talk about really deep issues and say, I don't have the answers, but we need to do research together. And there's going to be potential outcomes in the ZKM, in an art center like this, was really an absolutely marvelous opportunity. And so again, thank you to the IFG for being part of this.
Thank you. I would like to ask Bettina Grintenberg to say some words to us, please.
Yeah, it have been 2 really incredibly rich and inspiring years of collaboration with a lot of magnificent people, and I'm very grateful for the wonderful and inspiring encounters during that time. And in the words of Anna Tsing, every encounter transforms us in an unpredictable way. We are not in control even of ourselves, and I think this is exactly what we need: powerful encounters which transform us towards prospects to come, which still don't have representations in image, sound, and language. And at that point, I would like to especially thank all the artists who have dedicated a lot of inspiration, energy, and enthusiasm to this project, and opening really deep insights, new horizons, and representations about what it means to live in the critical zone, and who made up alternative languages, cartographies, imaginations, and stories, driven by a dedicated sensitivity, precision, and care about our entangled becoming with, and thus sharpening and transforming the sensorium of all of us. And I would also like to thank again, as Martin, our fantastic graphic designers, Operative Space, as well as the Berlin-based developers Agentur für Kranke Medien, who together have gave the digital platform of Critical Zones this great, ever-evolving and entangled reality within this incredibly short time of 5 weeks. And our special thanks go to Dan Wilcox from the ZKM Herz Lab, who worked really tirelessly with the artists to translate their work into the digital.
Thank you. Before I address Dara Mille from the Kuratorisches Team, I really would like to thank again Bruno Latour for his profound fundamental input in the project. He originated the project, and I thank you so much for your trust. I also would like to thank our sponsors, especially the Kulturstiftung des Bundes and the Stiftung of Baden-Württemberg and NBW, the Energie of Baden-Württemberg, because without their financial support, this undertaking, this adventurous enterprise would not have been possible. Again, thank you for our co-creators, Martin and Corintenberg. Now I would like to address the word to Dara Mille.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter and Bruno, for this exhibition, for wonderful ideas, for the possibility to work together and to profit from this network of the critical zone. And of course, we're operating here within the broader network of scientists and artists, collaborators, and we would like also to thank all of them, and especially the curatorial committee of the exhibition, which consists of Alexandra Aren, Bruce Clark, Jérôme Gaillardet, Joseph Körner, the critical study group, the critical zone study group at the HFG at the Karlsruhe University of Arts and Design, and also all the scientists and all the people who supported the research of the exhibition and who helped us to investigate these entanglements within the critical zone. Of course, also we look very much forward to building up the rest of the exhibition in the physical space, and here we would very much like to thank our technical team, without support of which it won't be possible to set it up, and especially Matthias Gommel, our scenographer, Anne Deuper, our technical project manager, and really all the technical team who is working with much enthusiasm and energy on building up this wonderful exhibition. And also, of course, the curatorial team of the ZKM gave us much support. Our colleague Jessica Menger and the head of the curatorial department, Philipp Ziegler, were very, very kind and helpful with their support to us. Of course, we have also partners and institutional collaborators without whom this exhibition wouldn't have been possible. And here we would like to thank the Critical Zones Observatory, the Hydrogeochemical Environmental Observatory in Strengbach, with Claire Pierret, the KIT, Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, the State Museum of Natural History in Karlsruhe, the TBA 21, Thyssen-Bornemisza Art Contemporary Academy, and again the HFG in Karlsruhe. Thank you all.
So you know what is really, really weird about a live digital online opening all by ourselves in the empty halls of ZKM? We don't have any applause, so please, everybody, applause. I hope you can hear it at home.
But Barbara, also what I forgot, of course, we have also to thank the Museum Communication Department, to Barbara and the Janine Berger, and who worked on the public program that we very much hope to make really public very soon.
Well, and then also all the initiatives, of course, so thank you. We've got so many thanks, and I'm happy that we got to applause a little bit at least. Okay, Peter Weibel, back to you.
We had the last days and night, we had a really wonderful time. Yeah? I also thank all the viewers and the visitors online, because this confirmed our ideas. Without you, the viewers and the audience, this is what I call the non-local audience. This streaming festival would have been a failure. So the enormous success of this festival is precisely possible through your participation. I'm so happy that you have been involved. Thank you, my dear non-local audience.
So now I want to take the opportunity in English to thank again the amazing team that has cohabitated in social distance for the past 3 days in the empty atriums of the ZKM. So every single helping hand, our interpreters, the camera team that is hidden here behind us, the communications team on the first floor, the sound on the first floor, the technical team in the entire house, our mission control up there, and of course our Aufnahmeleitung. I have no idea what the English translation for that is. I love you so much. You did such a great job. Thank you infinitely. And last but not least, of course, we said it many times and we will say it once again to you. Thank you, our audience. You have been with us for 3 days. You turned our Telegram chat into a tentacular entity, and you have supported us with all you had through the not that many technical difficulties that we had in the end. So power to the crickets. That's all I'll say. So enjoy and stay connected with the Critical Zone.